Hey everyone, this is Zealous of the Raven's Voice and ACL here, taking every chance possible to remind you of War for November. This is an Armored Core Verdict Day World Mode event for PlayStation 3 players, going strong all month. Here's how the event works. Register your team at armoredcorelegacy.com. During the month of November, if you battle alongside one of our mercs and win, you gain a point. Battle against one of our mercs and win, and your registered team can gain a point that way as well. At the end of the month, the team with the most points has a choice of prizes ranging from PSN store cards to AC model kits. Again, check out ArmoredCoreLegacy.com for all the details. Hoping to see many of you on the battlefield.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Ravens Voice. This is Tierson. With me as usual is Zealous.
Hello everyone.
And not with us as usual, but is here tonight is Cleric.
How's it going, everybody?
It almost feels like you're the old man around here.
Not compared to you. Sorry, man. I may have more AC years in me than you because I didn't have a hiatus, but no, you're still older.
I don't even know if that's the case. I don't want to debate that. But yeah, and I am getting older. My birthday's on Saturday, and I do feel old.
Yeah, are you on a walker yet?
Soon. I'm going to go see the doctor next week. I'm pretty sure.
Walker? Nah, he's going to skip the walk. He's going right for the electric wheelchair. You know him. That's what he's going for.
I'm going to get one of those scooters that you go around in the stores and everything, annoy people. I'm going to take up the whole lanes and everything.
Or you could you could totally fits right into our thread for tonight about hover legs. Grab a pair of those. They're kind of extinct. You should be able to get them, bargain bin now. So
that would be all. If I could have a hover scooter, oh my god, that would be awesome. Even if I wouldn't need one, I would have one. Okay, so let's stop talking about how old I am. So we got a couple things we want to talk about. We have a two-part show this week. We're going to talk about current events on this half, and then in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about an extinct, I can say that correctly, extinct leg type. The only time we've lost an entire category of ACs, hover legs. Actually, they were only around for 2 gens of the game, but they were around for quite a while despite that. And, we thought it would be interesting to put a little bit of a spotlight on these and talk about them a bit. People who didn't play in the PS2 era have never even touched these.
yeah, definitely. And I think the fascinating thing about these legs is that their influence can still be felt. There's elements of hover legs that are still kind of dispersed and kind of spread, throughout AC. And the poor things kind of got fragmented. They don't exist as their own type anymore, but they still exist in some sub-form in AC. We'll get into all that, though. It's interesting.
They exist in my heart.
That's what counts.
You're cold, black. I mean, never mind.
My cold, empty, dead heart. Just like hover legs. No, but okay. So we want to talk about. We want to talk about a couple things. Let's get it out of the way. I have a bruised ego about this. We plugged it for a few weeks. It did not do well, so let's talk about it now. The event that I was going to hold on December 7th has been canceled. Act for Charity, Armored Core Tournament for Charity, short-lived. Didn't get a lot of people. Host got a good amount of interest, but not a lot of people signed up. So without people, as a single elimination tournament, I had to let it go.
Right. It's one thing interesting that's reflecting this. I was thinking of events past as far as getting your cap of members or your cap of participants before you went on with an event. This had reasons in the past because people would be renting out let's say like a hotel conference room or something like that, so you'd want to make sure you could at least cover your costs by a certain point. You wouldn't want to be like 2 days out from the event and have 3 people come in or something like that. You'd have problems. We never really ran into this as much. I think back in the past for some of the LAN events. But obviously there's a different structure, there's a different setting for it here. We aren't running around looking for, oh my gosh, how are we going to scrap together enough money for a room? No. If anything, it was just looking to see how many participants we could capture and who we could get to, you get a certain amount of donations for the cause we were going for. And just looking at reality here, just looking at basically the facts. It's simple enough as far as who is registered. Enough interest just is not there. Unfortunate, but true, especially regarding the context of the event and I think what it was meant for. I think it really would have been a lot of fun, not only for the community but for players, those watching, those participating, and I don't know. I personally, I'd really want to see something like this take off. It's difficult to legitimize for a lot of players, at least, paying for events in the online era now. And people say I can just go do free battle or go play from where I'm sitting. But here's my opinion, a very legitimate reason to drop a little cash on a tournament. So.
Well, it's ironic that you say that because, we were talking about this throughout the week, and unfortunately, if you want some kind of legitimate event, you kind of have to pay to play a little bit. You have to divide that from those who are willing to literally put into the event instead of just signing up. And, it works as a bit of a safeguard for the event and legitimizes it a bit, too. Now, this case, this works in two different functions. One, there is the pay to get in, but secondly, it was the fact that the pay 100% of it was going to go to charity. But it helps to separate the men from the boys. Those who take an event seriously, or at least are trying to legitimize themselves and the event, versus those who are just like, oh, okay, I'll play, whatever. And then half the time, those people don't show up anyways.
So, remains to be seen if we will see something of a similar nature, same nature, crop up again in the future for events and tournaments. But this is something I'm interested to just see not only the community response, but hear ideas about, for the events and the how we handle tournaments now. We've hit on this tons of times, in the show, but the whole scene for tournaments has just drastically changed, both from the cloud of tournaments, as in what they represent for players and players participating, and how important they are to the community as a whole. And we don't really have that gathering nexus anymore. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. We got people out there that toss ideas out, I think, for events and stuff. But I'm hoping we get some more innovative things. We'll see. Hopefully it's not totally buried.
Well, so let's go from what didn't work to what is working, and that is War for November.
Yes.
So going strong. There's a little bit of time left. About 20 seconds. So we have 9, 8. Because I know how many days are in November. There's 8 days left for this event. Still a strong push. And last time I looked at all the numbers, there is a little bit of a race going on here for number one. It started out kind of heavy-handed here, but for one team, but another team's catching up, and I don't know. It'll be interesting. I was doing a lot of murking, but I haven't for the last couple of days, so my pulse isn't, or my fingers aren't quite on the pulse of what's going on with this right now. But I'm going to get back into it actually tonight.
Yep.
So, but yeah, War for November. We've been talking about it, and I think this event that Cheng has put together, I think it's really cool. I think this definitely works. So here we're looking at a style of event that isn't working, and now we're looking at a new style, a brand new kind of event that is working.
And as we've said, most of all, it leverages world mode, a feature, the overhaul of the conquest system that we've had, which is just awesome to see. A lot of the members of even like some of the people in the streaming community are really picking this up too and taking advantage of it. I don't know if anyone here tunes into Dig Dug's channel. He's had a number of like design featurettes he runs, just talking about his ideas about designing ACs and not playing. But he specifically was plugging War for November in his channel and just his recent videos that he's done to queue up for that. So it's kind of cool to see, there's a buzz about it. There's teams that are still going for this, excited about just playing the prizes and the whole deal in between it. So this has been a great success. It's been really cool to see people participate in it. I was a little late to it myself, but it's fun to see this just go off. And now that we got the points in place and everything, and we're clearly keeping track of the brackets, we'll see who pulls this out. A little over a week, so if you still are looking for a spot to get in, get on out there. You still got a bit of time to play. Join up, merc up, and just have fun. So
And I was pushing for Cleric to be a merc for this and to get bonus points if you actually found Cleric in your team. Because he's that.
It's funny you should say that. I was actually thinking about this. Coming this week out, being Thanksgiving time, me working in the computer retail work, unfortunately, that means I'll be really busy for a couple days. But the following week is going to be kind of a deader period for me. So I actually was considering this upcoming maybe Sunday. I don't know, maybe next Wednesday. About maybe just randomly showing up online and marking myself out. And if you find me, maybe you'll get a bonus set of points if you happen to hire me out and you win. We'll see.
That is, I think that is a great idea. We do have to declare that that is not official. We have to talk to Cheng about that, but I think that would be great, especially in these last few days, to give some extra incentive to try to get their points up. Give them a chance here, the lightning round, so to speak, and see if they can find a cleric and get some bonus points.
I'm imagining my PM box suddenly filling. Dude, get on, let me work with. Okay, I can just see it happening now.
No, well,
actually, I had people try to put me on their friends list, and I told them no one knows when I'm on, and that's the way it's gonna stay.
So, which as it should, but heck, you've heard it here first. Unofficial source, if anything, could very well be the start of something official. We'll see. Again, getting things put in place, and should things change, you can keep track of the thread we will have over at ACL. I'll be sure to put that in the description of this video if you're still interested in checking out some of the specifics about this event, or you're just looking for the rules and any clarification. So keep an eye on that.
A wild cleric has appeared.
You got an Ultra Ball? Something.
Jesus Christ! I hear that. Well, that was Pokemon crap, right? Get out of here.
Pokemon. Oh goodness.
There's no Pokemon in our record. I don't care how many people put it in their emblems.
Even the slow bros and everything else. I'm looking at you, Xenos. Sash. In any case, I think besides our notes with ACT, our notes with War for November, some of the other things, there's one other event that is going to be kicking into the judging phase soon. I do want to take a quick note on that, and we're going to be talking about this more very soon. That's Drac's event, the design contest. Now, submission period is over for this guy, and in our thread, there's a little bit of discrepancy over that. We weren't saying it's all over, period, it's done. No, the submission period.
Whatever. So. It's done. It's done. It's over. There's winners. There's winners, and they're each getting $1,000. And
no, oh man,
no.
It's good if you visit the events and tournament section over at ACL, you'll see that the divisions for each of these spots is cropped up now. We have the AC2 era, AC3 designs, 5 Verdict Day. There's the whole lot. We got high-res screenshots if you're looking at what designs made it in. There's the grand reveal, the paint schemes, and everything else. So it's fun to check out. It's fun to see what was submitted, who submitted it, and yeah, get on it. It's all posted and it's all available.
And we were talking about this a little bit, and this was before you joined us in our pre-show talks. Seeing some of the older games, especially the AC1 and AC2 games in high def like that, I mean, it just makes me want to play them. But especially the AC2 still looks gorgeous, especially in high definition. But that was a beautiful game back in the day, and I think that's in large part one of the reasons why it is the highest selling game in America for the Armored Core series. Is it just great looking game, and just cool ACs and mechs or whatever. Just everything just looked really nice.
Great look. It did so much right. It gave a very futuristic cut to Armored Core, as if it already wasn't futuristic enough, right? But you had this whole idea of being on Mars, and obviously a new generation of ACs. Even had a composer change, for the music. This was a big one-off for the series too. Mijk van Dijk did the soundtrack for AC2, and it took a very highly techno feel to it. I'm sure everyone that remembers AC2 can probably remember Roundabout, the garage theme. That's always what sticks in my head. But AC2 was bright. It was a very clear game. Just hearing even the menu sounds, I was going through it this week, looking at some of the hover ideas, and it just makes you smile. So it's one we miss. I know it's one I miss too. So.
Okay, so let's see. We had some drama We have some drama this week over at the ACL forums. I don't know how much we're going to want to talk about this, but I mean, it's there, and everyone's kind of looking at it and paying attention to it. You're a lot better at explaining these things. Else, do you want to take a shot at it, or do you want me to try to?
I'm happy to take a quick glance at it. Essentially, there's been some issues over with the 17 plus section. Now, for those of you unfamiliar, we have a section of the forums that we jokingly label "Put on your big boy pants." You go to discuss threads, and the what's happened is we've ended up having a removal, section removal, and then we've had a banning. There was a banning that happened earlier as a result, and just some contention about what can be posted, as far as how the moderation reaction to it has gone and whatnot. And I think there's a lot of murky water here. I think there were some things that were just undefined at the start as to what to post and what are the limits and whatnot. And some of those things were pressed. Others weren't tried upon, but it just kind of went a bit of a murky direction. And
we'll be on that too. Is that the quote unquote adults section topic, the big boy topic, things like that. I think what people were missing with this was the fact that this was supposed to be a place where adults could go discuss things like adults. I think that was more or less the point. It wasn't a place to show X-rated material. There's no real place for that on Armored Core Legacy. There's no reason for it to even exist on Armored Core Legacy. It really was a place for adults to talk to each other like adults, to have discussions about real things that are outside of gaming genre or the odd topic discussions. A place where, civil discussion between adults, which doesn't happen very often anymore online. So that was more or less, I believe, the concept of that forum section. A little unfortunate, but lesson learned. We'll take care of things from here on out. It's not that big of a deal. I just want to clarify that was kind of the purpose of that section, not a section for quote unquote only mature rated material.
Right.
I think that's a misconception when people hear that kind of phrase.
But yeah, and actually I had this wrong when we were talking about the staff meeting this last Sunday. I had forgotten about the fact that, depending on, this, obviously you buy, I guess you could have your own server, but in this case, in what 99% of people do is they rent server space. And a part of that is the fact that you agree to only have certain kind of materials on there. This helps with classifying what you're renting, how much you're paying for, and such. But it matters to the server that you're renting from. And there's legal stuff to that. And in the case for ACL and such, I mean, I believe there is an agreement not to have the content of it be of a pornographic nature. So it's not going to be there, guys. You can't do it. And I mean, this is one of those things that Clark was saying is like, we shouldn't even have to explain this, really. I mean, there's just no reason for it. There's no reason for it on the website. When you spend so much time in the Armored Core community, and you spend so much time conversing with these people, I believe that there does come a point where things are going to spill into real life topics and controversial ones, and that's what that section was there for. And it just hadn't happened yet. There wasn't a lot going on in that section. A couple odd topics here and there, but that hadn't really come about yet. And it sucks that at the moment that doesn't exist. And I would like to see that opportunity, if it comes, to have that chance to talk in that section. So, but I mean, it's just kind of obvious, guys. And really, I mean, anyone who is posting anything pornographic or partially pornographic, really, you're just kind of trolling the subject.
So that's where we're currently standing. Again, there'll clearly be posts about this if you want to follow the section, or as things come back up, just keep an eye on it as things emerge, and the threads should more than explain themselves. I'd say, rotating gears from that though, I'd say one of the last but very important pertinent things we've had going on in the community is talk about the new patch changes that are incoming. Now, we've had game FAQ threads about this. This has been talked about in other forums. We have pretty long now. It should be about 20 something pages, I want to say.
Yeah, 25.
Yeah, about 25-page thread now on the incoming patch. It's a whole string of patches for Verdict Day. This was, at least we started this thread in ACL late October. And basically, we're just helping to get an area to help them define and detail a lot of the incoming changes. Now, a lot of these, are hitting obviously JP side first. There's videos of some of the new like defenses, like the gameplay, and it's interesting with this set of patches that there's a lot happening. Okay, and this is not just alteration of some weapons or power or whatnot. There's some very, very specific things that are being altered, such as the parameters of like continuous fire on ricochet weapons, like how often you would hit those ricochets, and just the obviously that's going to start to affect some of the defensive calculations too. So there's a lot of detailed info going on here. I'm going to be sure to leave some links in the description on this vid, both to the thread we have and some of the other announcements. But it's interesting what From's doing with this. They are interested in taking poll from fans and from players about what's the reception of these patches, what's the reception of the changes, and they direct users to PlayStation 3 and an Xbox 360 side. They have a link directly to their site where they're doing this. If you're curious, I'm sure some of your browsers, such as like Google Chrome, can give you a quick translation if you're looking just for a quick, dirty English translation of things, how this is rolling out. But it's a whole string of implementations that we're getting, and I'm hoping that we get these in a pretty succinct, pretty rapid, solid order. As you know, patches were our bane of existence and struggle back in 5 to really get these things there and get them implemented. And we had our early ones. We've had our initial patch, shortly after release. We've had 0.2, but we have a whole string of information here and a whole string of part changes still to come, and I think that are really going to affect gameplay too. Very relevant stuff.
Get them. We better get them.
So they are in the air. We already have plenty of our members, especially the ones who were into playing on JP side. I know Dislocation, aka Entellus, he has had a number of notes as well about some of the part changes in our thread, and we've had other people talking about how they played through, some good postings, some links. So keep an eye on that. Keep a close eye on it. Nowhere near over. It's going to mean a lot for Verdict Day and for anybody playing. So.
Oh, hey, Zealous, where would they find that thread at?
It's a bit of a wonder, but I'm kind of tempted to plug a certain spot. If you're interested in looking for this thread and many others, go on over to armoredcorelegacy.com. You can check out our forums there. This specific link, I'll be posting a link to this thread, but this is also under general discussion. Also, don't forget, if you want to send us an email about something, your favorite cookie recipe, whatever it is, or something about Armored Core, mail us at ravensvoiceacl@gmail.com. Here and waiting for a reception. So.
All right. Let's see. You're gonna pass the note here by Cleric. He wants to comment on something here. Go for it, man.
Those of you who may or may not know my history, I was a long-time mod and admin for quite a few years for Armored Core Online or Mecha Network. Those who may or may not, I didn't even realize this earlier yesterday. I still follow him on Twitter. Apparently, what happened to the website all the way back in September is there was an accidental deletion of the database.
Oh.
Not entirely sure how that happened. In fact, I'm fairly certain this is one of the excuses I was given before when one of these ACO crashed, one of the 8 times it's crashed. Just give a little update to everyone may be curious or kind of forgotten about that place. Yes, he is still trying, I guess. But yeah, apparently it's down because of an accidental deletion of the database, and I think everyone should kind of let's put it this way: take that with a grain of salt. All right, that's the best. That's the kindest way I can put that.
Interesting. This is one that we really lost a bit of a pulse on. We had commented about the move to the Facebook page, and most of the content has seemed to flock there, but the URL has been pretty just dead in the water for a suspended amount of time here. We just weren't sure what happened. Right. I mean, it's even gone as far as being relinked. So, thanks for that.
I think
no problem.
I think I saw this post that he put. I don't know, here in the last couple of days. Doesn't he comment that he needs a lot of help running the website if he's to bring it back up?
It's supposed to be a link to the Facebook, but even his Facebook page currently is not working correctly. If you try to go to the Facebook page, it's currently not up or something. So, yeah, he's having a myriad of problems.
You're gonna make me look here. Hold on.
So again, as Clerics noted here regarding just forum history, ACO was a major hub point in the AC community. It was one of my first real connections to the AC community. Like coming on after near AC2's release and finding out that there was a community for AC. As things stand right now, as far as Raven Republic, Armored Core Universe, ACL, ACG, we've had also some of our other sites, go under. We had Ravenshaven, which has also disappeared off the board, and don't want too many AC forums to become extinct creatures. So if they are going to become extinct, it's good to at least know where they went or what happened with them. So
it is rare that they get to, what is it that thing that they do in the Native American culture, where when they get old enough, they're just going to walk off on their own and die.
So
That's what
that's lovely and morbid.
It's the truth. I forget. I should know all that, being Native American, but I don't remember what it's called. But no, that's what some of the Native American cultures do. That's what we did with A3C. It's just like
it did.
No drama. Just all right. It's time to go.
Had its day. So, well, good deal. As we announced in our topic thread, our main discussion for this week regarding AC are the hover legs. We're going to be covering that in part 2. When we come back, we're going to be talking about this lost dinosaur of a leg type, when they were introduced, kind of where they went in the AC series and what was part of their lifespan, and where they fragmented, where they dispersed to, and what they mean to AC now. Also, maybe a bit of speculation about if they did exist today, what would they be like? But we're going to save that for part 2. So, thanks for tuning in. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for listening. You're locked into part 2 of our podcast for this week, talking about hover legs and current events in the community, which we covered in our first half. With me is Tierson.
Hey.
And still hanging strong is Cleric.
Oh yeah.
So, these guys, you're all jazzed for this. So, as you know, we're talking about a now extinct, a now defunct type of leg. That's the hover leg. I know, right? These are missed. Now, Cleric, you probably remember we had a player in the Midwest who tended to come with us when we went to the ACMM events. Dragonis, he was a big fan of these.
Yeah, loved hover legs.
Yeah,
basically didn't play anything other than a hover.
Yeah, they were it's arguably his favorite. And I really can't point to many, if any, other hover specialists in our community. Period. And I think that was partly due to the special function of the legs, or how they worked, or other people just found different bases for mounting their cores. Whatever you want to call it, though, these were a here and gone type of leg. Hovers came into Armored Core during the AC2 generation, and really it felt like they were kind of here with us for PS2. And then kind of left afterwards and kind of dispersed. So let's jump back, I think, all the way to where these things started, when they were introduced and when they dropped in AC2. Part of looking into information this week, I had a lot of fun peeling back and just seeing where these things were placed as parts, where they kind of fell in the shop in your list, and how they worked. One of the neatest things I immediately noticed about hover legs from AC2 is that they were very intertwined with the tank section of legs. In fact, a lot of them were poorly labeled. You had one of the first hover legs, like the Type 1. I think it had a description like the first celebrated hover type. And then as you went on, you noticed that there were tank treads, a few tank treads, and then hover, and then tank, and then hover. Again, it was really kind of like a choppy distribution between the two. But a major way, obviously, to tell them apart was the mobility, the load capacity tended to give it away, but you still had some hovers with some
defense.
And the defense, and you still had those small differentiations, but let's zone in on that a little bit. The defense. I'm really fascinated that when hovers were introduced, they felt like something between a quad and a tank, but they were neither. They did not borrow the cannon trait, but what they did have was still a pretty impressive load for the speed, and their defense, as far as where they were sitting around, with the tanks, was pretty darn high. My eye specifically on the ZLR Zeo Matrix, Zeo's flagship hover type. Those of you, if you remember this leg, it was like a big dome shape almost. Looked like an insect from the bottom. Prisoner B52, can't say his name. I always mess that up. He was rank, I want to say, was it rank 3 in the arena? Because I think Lionheart was 2.
I think that sounds right.
It was the rank 3 hover. He was plus design with dual grenade launchers, grenade rifle, and a blade, and just kind of barreled at you. And it's interesting because it would be so easy to classify that design as a tank, but it wasn't. And here you had this type of leg that had even a different form of movement as well, but it still wasn't quite a tank, but it still borrowed some of the traits. And this was really cool. When you look at the axes of movement, hovers felt a lot more attuned towards momentum movement. And by that, I mean, you get a good kick of boost, and you could just kind of use the drag to kind of push yourself along. You didn't have to always drag hard on your X button, do boost. Yes, this is back before we had much control about changing our control pads. You could really go with the flow in these, but you had to be wary where you were sitting. If you pressed too much, you'd go into flight mode. You had to wait till you settled a bit, and then you could go ahead and press to do your normal boost. And just like with tanks, you couldn't have a booster with these. The boosters were obviously incorporated into the leg itself. So before I spin this too much further, and we're still sitting around AC2, I want to go around the table a bit here. I want to get some of the first early impressions of hover legs and what you guys encountered. I want to start with Cleric. And when you unboxed AC2, when you were going through it, how quick were you to pick up hovers? Were they something just immediate? When did you notice them? When did they start to become part of your play?
Honestly, I didn't really touch hovers very much. I really didn't start noticing them more probably around the Nexus area for a particular reason I'll share it later.
Mm-hmm.
But in AC2, I noticed them more or less as a way to get fast cannon arms, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the plus overweight things like that. If you had a plowing hover, you were dangerous. I mean, dangerous. Like, you could move wicked fast across the floor with cannons. I mean, it was nuts. That was more or less my first inclination with hover legs back in AC2, another age era.
Mm-hmm.
Was their speed. Now, for some reason, I remember a little differently than you did as far as the defense goes.
Yeah.
I pretty much always remember them being like more close to akin to lightweights, maybe slightly heavier lightweights. More like somewhere between a lightweight and a medium weight is kind of where I've always kind of remember their defense being. Not super paper thin, but
right.
maybe some some hard leather stature or something like that. Tough, but not really compared to other mediums, heavies, and tanks and things of the such. Even
Right.
some quads, for example.
Right.
Their movement did stick out to me though. It was very much kind of like going down a river.
Yeah.
You get a couple good paddles going. You get moving. You would have that general movement speed, that general inertia, taking you one direction. But if you wanted to switch directions, I remember there being a pretty severe, shall I say, kind of stop motion in between. Like, if you managed to circle your motion, like if you were going left, you go a little more forward, then move your right, it wouldn't really slow it down. But if you were just straight up strafing left, then went to strafe right instead, you would slow you down to the point of stopping, then bring you back to the right, which made you a really, really easy target. That's one of the first things I remember noticing about hover leg as far as mobility goes.
Yeah, for sure. It was easy to kind of become a sitting duck with these if you tried to do, I think, too much lock movement or too many, really jittery changes or something too abrasive, on the fly. Real quick, too, it's interesting you focus about the defenses. I have this tendency to really look at those Zeo legs. When I think of hovers, for some reason, AC2 is the ones I always come back to. And, I'll be honest, I did not play with the light ones enough, outside of the ones in another raise that you got from defeating 9-Ball Seraph, to really get a true pan on, I guess, where all those felt like they set defensively. I just love the Zeo legs, and I smiled when they returned in the portable series, for AC. I believe in LR we got those legs back. But yeah, the movement of these is really interesting, and I'm glad you highlighted the circular movement of them. The one thing that always hit me with hovers was once you got your momentum going, and if you wanted to cut certain directions or you wanted to change your positioning, doing a good semicircle or kind of learning how to maneuver that would tend to set you up a little better than just a immediate stop, course correction, try to rebuild momentum again. No, it was the legs really played like a flow. And I think, again, that's where the momentum game really came in. If you're using them right, you could use them to your advantage, but it was really easy to goof that motion up and just start going into flight or something else you didn't want to do. It was a fine balance between staying grounded and when you actually wanted to use your flight ability.
Well, exactly. Well, that along with one more thing here, along with what you just said, is the fact that hover legs were similar to the fact they had no jump function.
Right.
They didn't have one.
Right.
It was either you were floating around or you were floating up in the air. You had no way of jumping with hover legs, which I think was kind of made sense from the design standpoint. I mean, how do you jump with something that doesn't have anything to launch off of? It's supposed to be hovering the whole time, anyways. But that was, especially with I know playing tournament wise, especially in the 3 era going on from there, especially through LR things like that, was how much jumping was used for dodging. And it was used a lot, even back in AC2. Like, jump, in the air to your left and, midair kind of switch to your right to do like a twitch dodge, or like, finesse your dodge when a grenade launcher's coming out to you, which I always have thanked you so much for all the grenade launchers you've always launched at me and made me very good at dodging the gigantic yellow ball coming at my face. I have gotten very good at dodging grenade launchers and big heavy cannons for that reason, even with a heavy biped. Like, I'm not going to toot the horn too much, but as far as the AC2 through LR era, I will say I'm very good at dodging grenades with a heavy biped because you shot so many at me. So that was a definite negative for me using hover legs, was because I felt like my ability to dodge like I want to was kind of stripped away from me. And it required a different kind of mindset when it comes to maneuverability and getting away from your opponent as far as not taking damage.
Now, Tierson, would you say some of this was similar for you, just how you went into hovers, how you discovered them? I mean, or did you have a whole different, happenstance upon these when you ran into them?
I was not a fan of hovers until Gen 3. I didn't think that they had a lot to offer in C2 and Another Age. There were the hover legs that you'd spoken of, the kind of like bugs. Those are pretty good. But besides that, I just, I always had a hover AC. In Gen 3, I had a couple of them, but they were fun. They were, but at the end of the day, there wasn't really something that I found myself feeling that I could compete with.
Right.
So I think the only exception to that was I had a couple, and I seriously played with a couple hover bladers.
Right. And it's funny you mentioned that. That was directly on my mind about hovers and blading and what they meant. I think you'd really see this crop up later in the tournament scene too. I'm thinking specifically of the ACMM events, the ACMA events. I know Baker was always one I highlight about this. He always tended to use a hover blader, and I think they did experience a bit of an era of popularity in terms of using blades. You could still use your fully horizontal swipe. You could cover plenty of area, and you could use that x-axis of movement to really to your advantage, especially for just highly mobile attacks. You could do your strike and really still keep the momentum going and sweep out of direction, maybe faster than some of your counterparts could. So I think I'd argue, I wasn't there for the tournament scene for AC2 and Another Age. So wish I was, and so that's a game I've always wanted to participate in competitively. But while I didn't see that for 2, noticing the changes that happened in 3, the movement I believe got a little sharper, just a little sharper with hovers, and this carried on till we hit LR. I think by LR they had even a bit more of a twitch feel to them. It felt like you had more control over them, and I think that's also a good thing that could really play in when you're talking blading only matches. So
well, along with the blade only matches too, you're talking about with hovers and bladers, how they were kind of popular.
Yeah.
Well, something I noticed, because for the longest time, except for obviously AC1 with the super broken, Human Plus, where you could get the blade wave, which that blade wave in AC1 was just stupid strong.
Yeah.
The wave bladers with hovers was very common at that point. I mean, you saw a ton of wave bladers, basically zipping around the arena as much as they could and throwing waves at you, hoping just to get the AP lead and just like running circles around you the rest of the time, being, you can't catch up to me, and just waiting for the timer to run out, and then they win. So I think that's kind of what Baker more or less got known for as well. But yeah, that's talking about the hover legs and bladers. I noticed a lot more they kind of was a good utilization of the wave blades.
Yeah, for sure. Chang has used the analogy once, and during the AC5 era of calling quads attack helicopters in a sense for their hovering ability and really just unload with the salvo of weapons. If quads are the ones for this era, I point at hovers honestly as the attack helicopters for the earlier eras, and really for this reason. It wasn't necessarily because of their um, necessarily crazy aerial movement, but their ability to sweep through and to do a blitz. Again, you really had to be careful with the way you were treating your momentum and how you use these. I think it came down to an argument between pinpoint maneuvering versus, as I've said many times now, momentum. But they still had that ability. Now you couldn't obviously deliver the punch with cannons unless you were plussing. If you wanted to cannon with these things, you would literally ground yourself, which never made sense to me. I always felt if you fired a high caliber cannon on a hover while grounded on the ground, you just send yourself flying backwards or into a really bad flip. But while they didn't add up as much, I do remember seeing some plus designs like running the CNG 300 and some of the other really powerful weapons at the time like that. So interestingly enough, I guess some of the gun platforms tended to be some of the more popular ones, I guess, and people at least to mess around with were some of the plus designs. But blading, I think these saw a lot of popularity. I'm kind of bridging into AC3 here, as well as like as we've just said, the wave blading. Now, I didn't see a whole lot of parry blading with these specifically as we had these introduced. More of our hardcore parry bladers in the community, I'm thinking of Decapman Booyaka specifically, made specialties out of these with bipeds and did just fine. But looking at the leg type by this point and what it meant, coming into AC3, they still had their role. They were still branching out, defining themselves. With AC3, we started to get a little bit more control over some legs. Quads specifically, quads gaining a walk animation as opposed to a slide, which I know Tierson wants to talk about.
Oh, not really.
Yeah. Quads gaining a walk as opposed to a slide. Some of the just controls getting a little more sensitive, a little tighter. I think that played right into hovers, and an advantage to them. Again, I don't feel that they just all of a sudden experienced a huge surge in popularity or use, but they were still, I think, in that process of kind of developing and growing. Now, let's not continue to talk about hovers and not, glaze over, I think, the key thing that they were known for. That was their ability to avoid water. So we know ACs in the earlier eras were not watertight. So falling in the ocean, you were going to have problems. Your operator would always tell you this. Fall in the ocean, we're not recovering you. That's it. The fun thing about hovers, and some of you probably remember this from those like defense submarine missions, was you'd have some more freedom to go out on the seas and on the waters. Now, it wasn't complete freedom. Bear in mind, if you got hit hard enough on the head or the right impact, you could still be forced down into the water. It was not an invincibility ticket to water, but on certain maps, it would give you a distinct advantage in terms of placement and movement over what other legs would be able to do. And this is funny, we've seen this trait in hovers disperse. This is one of the main things that fragmented. We'll talk about this as we go into, when we hit AC4. Obviously, ACs being able to hover directly over the surface of water. The first thing I thought of, wow, someone just broke the parts off the hovers and installed them in the next. Here we have this part clearly implemented. But if anything, I think that was the key they were known for. There was always a little joke way back when of hovers being able to, use them for certain missions. Like, use a hover for this one because it's easier. You're going to encounter a lot of water. You got more room to move. You won't have to stay in one spot. But I want to ask you, Tierson, did you ever feel that utilizing hovers was a thing that you just wanted to do, like for certain missions, or even going into AC3, SL, etc., like Nexus, were they always just still kind of there on the side? I mean, did you ever use these as like a sub leg for certain missions, or?
Yeah, I mean, going through the game the first time, you would come across a mission, and if there was a lot of water there and you didn't get through it with whatever build you were using without hover legs, then you would go to that. It's like, well, okay, there's nothing but water in here. Obviously, I'm just going to throw on the hover, take care of what is basically the biggest threat in this mission.
Yep. Cool. And pretty much same for you, Cleric, or?
Yeah. I feel like Armored Core 5 kind of stole, my mantra a little bit, come heavy or not at all. That's kind of always been my way of looking at things. If I can't do a mission with a heavy AC, then I'm just not playing it right. That's kind of more or less always my mentality on things. So I never really found a reason to use hovers to complete a mission or anything like that. It never even dawned on me to even try.
Right. There's other missions where I think these come into play that I think even they'd help, but they still be kind of dangerous to use. If you remember the Leviathan mission from AC3, it was oh goodness, it was like in a partially submerged kind of like warehouse setting, and you had to deal
Yeah.
with it was a massive MT that would periodically surface. You had to deal with, and then would go back and would go into a new position. Having a hover was pretty useful for that mission if you wanted to make use of that, but if you weren't paying attention, you could easily run under certain steel beams or get hit at the right angle, and you're still sunk anyway. So it depends. For most players, I think during this phase, during this time in Armored Core history, that's usually what I'd hear from people saying, well, I just decided to use a hover for this mission just because it's easier, just because it fits, and they go back to whatever strategy they wanted to do for the rest of it. And
Well, there was that, and I feel like in AC3 NSL era,
mm,
um, they kind of lost some of the thunder
mm,
because of the invention of the jousting tank. Um,
ah, important to
I
highlight.
really feel like, as far as like, if you think about it, a jousting tank is very similar in movement style to a regular, floating
Hmm.
hover leg.
Hmm.
Very similar. Moving very fast, you can move certain directions. You can go back and forth a little bit. You have to be careful about your changing your flanking directions, things like that.
Hmm.
That kind of like talk about that. Speaking of the attack helicopter analogy,
Yep.
I thought that kind of stole the hover's thunder a little bit. That with the jousting tank, you can have your cannons on your back
Yeah.
firing gigantic, heavy damaging projectiles at you, while at the same time moving the same speed as a hover,
Mm,
and also having 2 to 3 times the defense.
mm,
So the jousting tank kind of made the hovers completely obsolete from competitive play, in
mm.
my opinion, more or less.
Well, we mentioned joust. I think it's important to look at where that joust movement came from too. Where all that speed came from. Let's face it. For the jousting tanks, obviously overboost maneuvering was absolutely key. This was the age of Go Map, Go Shut, Big Phil, and some of the others that help really push certain tank designs. And then we had the jousting tank, and we've seen excellent use of this via MOC. A lot of the other major tournaments we've had in our community. Um, what made this slightly different though was with the joust tank, yes, you normally take your cannon, but being in overboost movement, naturally you were slightly more restricted. Now you still had your strafes, obviously, so had your go forward, and with the addition of the turn extensions, you get 2 tags in instead of one, especially with the GNL, which could potentially be very deadly. That added a really good nuance to their mobility, but it still put a lot of strain on the boost. Now, it's not to say hovers weren't drainy or that they did not, strain, but it almost felt at that point that the small arms fire was better put in the hands of hovers, whereas the heavy-ended fire, such as using cannons like the GNL, jousting up with LQ-15, jousting with CNG, whatever you wanted to use, that was more the domain of tanks. And I do concur in the statement that it was the tank that seemed to win out, at least for popular competitive styles, as far as for jousting, even though you were, focused more on the OB movement than just your boost movement. So this is interesting. This is important to compare because I think both sets, whichever side you were coming from, took specific energy management, especially if you want to use your turn jousting on a tank. But it's still two different styles. I mean, the hover still had the really tight control while keeping its boost, and it could still do really well in small arms. I think a good AC to highlight during this time too is just an AI, but I'm sure a lot of you remember Exile, the AC that would appear at the bottom of the arena once you cleared everything else, and he very simple. I believe it was just a plus hover with the Moonlight and an MG 1000, and he just bob over you, just keep hovering in like an M pattern until he gun you down or slashed you. I think that's one of the few examples we've had from a major AI. I think making use of those, but it's kind of interesting. It's odd. I'm interested to see if there's, or hear rather, if there is anyone that remembers more hover footage during AC3, during SL, competitively. I know Team Raven, a few others out there were really interested in the MOC scene, documenting that. I know probably if you just dig back through some of the vids, they're on YouTube as well. Joust, Kobo, Rusi, Sandman, Watcher, Oliver. If you play with some of these names and pairings and verses, you're going to come across some AC vids. So I'm sure there's plenty to crawl across there and see who was making use of that at the time. But nonetheless. So we look at what happened with these going into Nexus. Now, here we are. We're hitting an era with more heat, less energy, a change to the system. Even
love
though,
Nexus.
yeah, you did love
I'm
Nexus.
just going out there now so everyone understands.
Yeah.
Love Nexus to this day. Still my personal favorite Armored Core game. I might explain that maybe in a later post or something like that. I'll explain maybe why. I did maybe in the AC Raven Age kind of thing, but love Nexus so much.
So, here we are with NX. We've got the AC3 parts still. The aesthetic has not changed, but we had massive changes, happen with the system, and the way things were, all the parts were renamed. We had balance overhauls and everything else. I think this is an important chapter to highlight for hovers because I think this is where the hover tank mentality started to creep back in, at least my head. Again, I was really paying attention to this more during AC2 with the Zeo's flagship. And there crept in a very powerful type that some will probably remember, the LHT-92 legs, which were banned from most Nexus tournaments. They're such an interesting case because, to my memory, they were not necessarily, a base hover, just sitting hovering on the ground. They were basically tank treads, but were nicknamed hover legs because of their utterly insane speed to load and everything else you could get out of them. It made them a very competitive, very, very powerful part. And this concept of the hover tank was, thrown around and debated at this point. And I said, okay, well, here's the community accepting something about these legs and taking, traits and kind of dubbing them over in something else. And it worked, not just, competitively, but frankly, in terms of gameplay. And I just kind of want to pan on this too, because if I recall, ACMM3 was our event that focused on Nexus. That was our Nexus tournament for the Midwest.
Yes.
If you can kind of dredge some of that back up from that day, Tierson, do you remember seeing a lot of tank play or a lot of hover play during that time, or seeing? I know those legs were banned for them, but during free player, just what was your experience? ACMM, pre-ACMM gatherings. Did you find a lot of players like running these, or do you make use of them?
I'm going to point to Blading. I mean,
Yeah.
in regular competition, they just both those legs and hovers and tanks. Not a lot of play.
And I think part of this too was the heat we saw at the time. I know some of the earliest videos I saw from Nexus actually featured hover play on JP side, but heat management became a very big part of your game. Obviously, a good BGR combo was critical to your success. Some people did not want to go through all the trouble of, the extra heat that you had now from the hover legs and managing that and getting that straightened out. Backdoor cooling got hot for a while, pun intended. Using generators forcibly with very high force cooling to keep yourself in a force burn, so you could balance your energy and keep leveled out at a certain burn, so you could always stay at a certain tier of cooling. Usually, you'd see these designs paired with extensions like Jiren, etc., to help boost up energy for the times you needed it. There are a lot of different crack theories, I think, flying around at this time. You did have your occasional, hover blader or something like that, but for Nexus, it's those legs specifically, the LHT-92, that kind of stuck out. And I remember sitting thinking, man, well, maybe this is a real up. Maybe this is a sign at some kind of crazy, genuine hybrid coming out again, or something really being developed with these, or they're really going to take them further. But I don't know. I think other players would disagree with this. I think NX was starting to see a real decline in these. Others have highlighted, hey, they started to die in AC3 or maybe in SL. But I personally, Nexus, I believe, was a real fall point for hover legs as they started to decline.
Well, I have to agree with you, and I'll tell you exactly why I think that, and it's exactly the reason why. Well, part of the reason I love Nexus so much because it was one of the introductions of one of my personal favorite parts of all time, which is the urchins. Mm-hmm. I love that inside part. To this day, I use it on all of my mechs, all of my ACs, every single one of them, in Nexus, Ninebreaker, and Last Raven. I did not take a AC into a battle without those things. They have saved my butt on so many occasions. It's not even funny. In fact, they even won me a spot in a tournament on a certain occasion.
Yeah.
for LR. So basically, urchins were anti-hovers. It's what they were. You would think, basically, those may or may not know what urchins are. Basically, urchins were an inside part that you could launch out of your AC. It scattered a bunch of little miniature bombs that, within a certain proximity, would explode. And when they explode, they do a little bit of damage, but also produce a ridiculously high amount of heat.
Yep.
I remember watching the videos and stuff like that when next about to come out, and the first time I saw someone use urchin, and all I heard was this guy launch this like gray mass out of himself and run on the ground. I hear this plink, this little plinking sound hit the ground. I'm like, what is that? All of a sudden, I see this dude's heat gauge just go up to the wire in red. I'm like, what is that? So I instantly fell in love with that part. But the problem is, you'd think with hovers being above the ground would not be affected. In fact, this probably would have been a cool mechanic to integrate into hover legs, but they didn't. Hovers were just as susceptible to urchins as anything else. And the problem is, with the heat mechanics and energy changes in Nexus, they were very unforgiving to hovers. And these were basically hover bait, like I said before. All you had to do was put a set of urchins to the right, a set of urchins to the left, put some concentrated heavy fire on the guy in front of you, have him try to dodge to the right. He'd hit the set, go to complete burn at that point, throw another set down. At that point, that dude has no energy. He has no way of moving. And when a hover has no energy, that hover is dead in no time at all. So I think one of the big decline for hovers was not necessarily just the urchins. I don't think that was a help because they were a very popular inside part. But it was also the fact that the heat mechanics were very, very unkind to hovers. Because if you're a biped or in light, medium, or heavy, you have no energy. Yeah, it sucks. Yes, you're going to take more damage. But you can still jump in the air and you can still do your twitch dodging to maneuver some certain things to keep you from taking an absolute amount of damage. When a hover was out of power, not so much. A hover without power is pretty much dead in the water. To kind of make dead in the water, a good example for hover legs on water, whatever. That was not really intended.
Go on.
But with the heat mechanics and energy mechanics were in Nexus, they were so unforgiving that hovers were affected probably just about the worst of anyone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you see the decline, especially starting in the Nexus era.
Yeah. Taking a quick look at, twitch dodging and jinking, what people, would use as tools to try to, avoid certain amounts of fire. Again, hovers, not having jump, this is nothing new. They haven't had it since they were introduced to this point. But them not having jump, not being able to forcibly, if time right, change the trajectory of a, critical shot. Obviously, that didn't help, and, compounding with the issues. And then, your different plane of movement, even though you had tighter control at this point, I think over hovers, you still had a lot of momentum. And the problem about it was, if you weren't paying attention to where you were going or where the urchins were sitting, because you were still over the ground, you could still fly over mines very easily. Just when you were trying to recover from a great circle movement or do that positioning that you once thought was your advantage, it could really screw you over if you weren't looking where you were going carefully or you weren't placing things right. Now, with all these things compounded, we started to move forward, and I really started just to really lose track of hovers at this point as far as players actually making use of them. It seemed that things really narrowed down in the types and the categories people ran. Your standard bipeds, but your tanks and your quads and everything else saw use. And things go on until we hit Last Raven, and they introduced the frame breaking mechanics. And this was just. You talk about mafia brutal. You talk about mafia kneecap breaking. This is where hovers just suffered horribly.
And again, urchins
would, if they did not get an instant break on those legs, they would give you damage at least. And damage hovers were not any fun to run on. It would set you on the road very quick to getting ruined. And if I recall, hovers seem relatively fragile. On LR, if you've concentrated fire in the right spot, or if you caught people overhead too many times, or linear rounds, or whatever you want to call it, they just had a difficult time. I felt the things you already had to deal with in Last Raven. It probably annoyed most OB freaks out there to have their core damaged enough, which was usually the first area that tended to receive damage. But the hover legs just didn't help the system. Sparking hover legs was. You were going to be dragging your AC along and probably taking a really hard hit at any moment.
Yeah, and you know that, and talk about urchins back, in Nexus. Yeah, energy is a little easier in lower. Yeah, heat wasn't quite as bad as in LR as was in Nexus, but like you said, with part breaking, 9 times out of 10, if I let it set a full volley of urchins on the ground and you run over it, yeah, your hover legs are broken. 9 times out of 10, they were busted instantly, and broken hover legs, you're dead meat. You have no chance anymore. The moment your hover legs broke, you cannot win pretty much. I mean, if you were the most amazing hover player of all time, maybe I could see you eke out a win. Maybe. Even then, I'm kind of down it. Broken hovers were basically not really hovers anymore. They were basically useless at that point. So once again, another reason why I love the urchins so much, how they were just breaking so many things. But yeah, the hover legs just suffered even more. And like you said too, some parts could take a fair amount of damage, especially like cores and stuff. Like you can get lobbed against by high projectile items, grenade launchers, laser cannons, things like that, and you could survive quite a few hits.
Yep.
Hover legs just seemed especially brittle. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I saw broken hover legs, even without urchin play.
Yeah.
Just seeing the fact that hover legs were busted by the end of the match, it just happened so often. And it's unfortunate because I think that's really what hindered them all the more and basically kind of put the nail in the coffin, so to speak.
Yeah.
By LR time frame is that part breaking in LR was something to be avoided at all costs. And as easy it was to break hover legs in LR was a very good incentive to stay away from them.
And pitting them against, I think, the high break weapons, I think just showed how dangerous they were. I highlighted, linear rounds a while ago. Well, even more so, it wasn't just the back weapons, although the back mounts tended to really help add to that break punch. But the certain rifles that place well just really added up against these things. So here you have it. The end of the AC3 gen with hovers. We've seen them develop, to a degree. They kind of flirted with tanks once more in some forms, like the LHT-92, and went back and forth. But here they are. Just on a general decline, and we open up in the 4th gen, AC4, going into PS3 and 360, and they're gone. And that's it. They've been abolished. But the next have the ability to hover over water. So it's like they took one of the trademark traits of hover legs and just incorporated those, into legs, period. And let things go from there. The type really didn't exist. We had our quads, we had our tanks, we had our bipeds, our RJs, but it was a silent funeral. I felt there wasn't a lot of attention on these. They were just gone, and it was as simple as that. There wasn't anything drawn out about it.
People weren't really sad about it either, in case
No.
you guys noticed. I mean, there were some people like, oh, we lost a leg type that's less of diversity or blah blah. But in all honesty, how many people were using hover legs? I mean, really? I mean, let's be honest. Hardly anyone was. I mean, other than from a purely nostalgic point or purely from a customizable ability point or variation point of having more variety in your builds that are capable of or whatever, yeah. But in all honesty, people aren't really. I know I wasn't really sad to see them go. I thought they were a useless part by LR anyways. And you mentioned the introduction of hovering with AC4, you can hover over the water. But I also mentioned, as a little thing there, one of my favorite things to do to this day is I'm not a big fan of 4-on-4 answer. I've already made my piece on that very clear a few episodes ago. But one of my all-time favorite things to do is underwater blading in AC4. Still love to do that. That is extremely fun. But yeah, with the silent demise and funeral, extremely silent demise and funeral of hover legs. Honestly, I feel like hover legs had some potential to be a unique and very useful hover leg type. For example, like I said, with the urchins, make them immune to ground weapons. Like if it's on the ground, it doesn't affect hovers because they're not on the ground. I mean, if you would have done something cool with this, if you would have done some sort of flight pattern, if you would have done something unique to hover legs beyond what they already were to make them more of a draw, I felt like they were a good potential. I just felt like it was an idea that was thrown out there. Like, hey, we need another leg type other than what we have with tanks and heavy bipeds and quads and stuff. Let's do something different. Well, we took out quads hovering, more of a leg walking type. Let's keep hovers going. I feel like they just kind of kept them there just for variation's sake and didn't really, fully seek out what they could do with them and really flush them out for what they could have been.
Right.
And in all honesty, for all the mobility they offered, they had the great potential to be extremely dangerous, especially to against slower opponents. They really didn't have that opportunity to do that. The problem is their overall design was kind of poorly executed, which made them nigh useless in later games. And it's unfortunate because I really would have liked to seen what a fully fleshed out idea on a hover leg type would have been.
But before we go into some, I guess, the speculation on the what ifs, such as the what if we included, this part in AC5 or AC6 later. There is something I do want to look at in retrospect about these, and I think it's a very good point that Tierson brought up about these earlier, about how essentially hovers borrowing some ideas from tanks or quads, that some of the earliest designs we saw in Armored Core seem like templates for these. Those you remember, the earliest quads we saw in AC1 through MOA didn't have a walking animation. They didn't in 2 either, but it was more of a flatten out, sit down low, and slide across the ground. And that smooth movement, I felt it translated differently. We had hovers by AC2, and we still had the slide with quads in AC2, but hovers tended to take that, I think, to the next extreme or to the next level. So in a way, they feel almost experimental like that they were able to take rough concepts, I think, from legs and kind of develop them into something else and make a class of its own. Going forward, though, here's what I am curious about. If both of you, do you feel that if hover legs were introduced into AC5, would they have a fit? Would they have a fit in the current generation? What are some ways that you could just kind of ballpark that they would work? Or do you think they'd even belong?
Yeah, I do. I think that they would have a good place in this current game. We were talking about it a little bit before the show. I think an advantage and a disadvantage. You still have the obvious advantage of no issues with water. Not
right.
that it even kills you anymore, but it can damage you now on verdict day, and still just not an issue. A couple questions when we've talked about this to people in the past, and such as how would that work? And actually, somebody commented about it in the post over at ACL about this. How would they go up walls?
Yeah.
How would they deal with that? And, I think that's a simple fix. You just kind of have the animation where the bottom part of the lower part of the AC kind of turns towards the wall, and in fact, this becomes a big advantage to them is that they go up it not cumbersome like ACs do. They actually glide up very easily. And that, in effect, a disadvantage that they could have is that considering they're so light and they are basically in the air, you don't let them use cannons. And I think with that, and then their mobility, and basically how they could play overall, merging them into the current gen, I think they would play real well.
Claire, you think they'd have a spot?
I think they could have. Like I said, it kind of goes back to what I mentioned before. They need to be fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
I felt like they were kind of thrown in there a little bit, and they were kind of seeing how they would play and see what would do with them, and didn't really apply them as a unique leg type. A lot of what Tierson was saying, if we were to implement them in, let's say, for Armored Core Verdict Day, if you let them kind of keep that speed notion like you have now in Armored Core 5, let them keep that variation, let them keep that momentum going. Maybe adjust them a little bit as far as like how they go up in the air. Being a person who is a heavy biped, or I'm more like a tank player, I know how much it hurts not having vertical. And Armored Core Verdict Day, not having vertical very much sucks. It makes playing very difficult, especially in certain maps. So they would have to kind of fix the hovers as far as how they go up into the air. They would kind of need to make them more usable in that sense to keep them from being giant targets that are easily who can't make it vertical ascensions, things like that. That would need to be fixed.
Yeah, like I was saying, I mean, you can actually do a 180 on that and actually make them some of the best that can go vertical.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what you need to do with it. So I could definitely see them fitting. They kind of go a little bit against the kind of nitty gritty grinding feel that Armored Core 5 Verdict kind of has.
Yeah.
I mean, with you really kind of with the Armored Core Verdict Day and 5, the way the mechanics and the aesthetics of the games, it has this very much gritty feel to it. Like you almost feel like you can feel the trank teds, rolling on the ground. Like you see like the indentations of the walking and the thumping and the feeling, and you see all that when people move in Armored Core 5 and Verdict Day. That would be a very stark difference to hovers.
Yeah.
Because that is not what they would be like. So I think it would be interesting to see how they would handle aesthetic-wise and mechanics-wise how they work to kind of make it match up with the rest of the Armored Core universe they created with the 5 and VD series.
See, I think it's their difference that would make them fit in. I think that they were very much like they were in the previous games. I think that's how they fit in, is that they are a bit of a connection to, okay, well, everything else has changed in this game, but at least hovers are still like they used to be.
For sure. That's heck a question I think we could pitch even broader. If anyone has thoughts on where you feel hovers would fit now, do they have a place in the current era? Do they not? Post up in our dedicated thread we're going to have for this podcast over at ACL, or drop us a line. I'm kind of interested to see if there's a bit of community thought, any kind of consensus on that too. I know myself. I think you've highlighted a lot of the points. Most importantly about fleshing these out well and just scaling their overall fit with what we already have with leg types. But I'm still hopeful, and I'm curious to see if we're going to have another leg type introduced once more for a new generation of Armored Core come Armored Core 6. Yes, I know we tend to make our wish list real early.
But you have opened up a can there, man. What could they possibly put in there besides Transformer legs, which is something I've predicted and dreaded that they will ever do. Like I said, the day my tank treads turn into biped legs, I'm done. Transformers and I'm done.
Oh man,
what you got against Optimus Prime? All right, man.
You guys know I'm a huge Transformers fan, but come on, you don't mix Transformers and Armored Core. It's already getting to be kind of muddy water.
Oh goodness. And just looking back here, just overall, I think the thing that I miss most about what hovers offered to Armored Core was that they were a leg type that required a certain touch, a bit of a delicate touch in maneuvering. It wasn't something you could just kind of thoughtlessly, shift between your X and Y in terms of movement, your flight and your ground movement. You had to really feel that transition with your boost to make sure, okay, I've cut off for my flight, ready to hit, a clean path, horizontally or wherever I need to go and control. I felt they were one of the, if not, the leg that I think really got players in just thinking tactically how to make use of this leg. That it kind of feels like I'm playing two legs almost when I played hovers. The flight mode always felt standard, like what most ACs could do, just with the rise. But then the lack of jump and their control on the ground was really special. No other leg really had that. And for that, I think I'll always have them to thank for what they brought tactically to AC and kind of bringing in that element. It was like you had to balance not just your customization and your weapons and everything, but then this movement. I mean, they had their own specific set of it. Slide jumping really didn't have an effect with these. You could still tightly curve your OB maneuvers and whatnot, but they had their own specific methods and their own ways of inertia. I'll just pass that around a moment. I mean, Tierson, what are you taking away with you for hovers? Is there just something that jumps out about them that you're like, that's awesome that they brought this to AC, or that's terrible that they brought this?
What jumps to me is that I want them back. I may not even be a big fan of them, and that's fine. I don't have to be. I want them back because I'm never a fan of the most customizable game that's ever been made.
Yeah.
Taking things away. I'm not a fan of that, and they need to be brought back in.
Right on, Cleric.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank Hover Leg for being awesome urchin targets. No, but seriously though, what I take away more or less from hovers is more or less this. I really feel like they weren't flushed out. I know I mentioned kind of a little bit before. I really felt like they were an idea that was implemented but never fully thought out, and they should have been made even more unique than they already were, to make them more competitive and more unique, even though to make them stand out. Yes, they were Hover Legs. Yes, they were different. Yes, their mechanics were different. No jumping, blah blah. But there needed to be something to make them different, other than they just can't do certain things.
Yeah,
they needed to be able to do certain things, and I feel like that's kind of what they were missing a little bit. But I really, what I take away more or less from hovers than anything else was more or less the last gen they were a part of was how awesome they were at absorbing urchins, because they made me so good at using those things, because they really got me down to how to lead an AC very well with their planting those things on the ground, things like that. One of my favorite tactics was they taught me to pull a 180, throw some behind me, then go forward, have someone think they're flanking me, then land on them and hear the sound, and knowing that you fell for my trap, and then start beating them down. So they very much got me to where I needed to be to use urchins competitively, which is why I more or less take away from them.
with the sadistic edge on the close. All right.
Yeah.
That's all I have for it. For notes on this one. I know if anyone else had anything to add, but we didn't have anything, I think, on the major horizon for our next week. We'll keep you posted. Watch our threads. We tend to announce ahead of time what we're going to be discussing. Unless it's a throwaway or something crazy. We'll even let you know if it's that, but I'm sure it won't be. Stay tuned. We still got a lot of events happening. The War for November, as that wraps up, we got the design contest to still follow, and just developments as they go, and most importantly, the patches too. Keep an eye on those things. We'll be looking at it, and drop us a line if you got anything relevant or any great info to post. Remember, once again, that's RavensVoiceAcl@gmail.com if you want to drop us an email, and don't forget to visit ArmoredCoreLegacy.com, most active forum for AC right there, and we want to keep it like that for a nice long time. But if anyone else didn't have anything to add, I think that'll do it. That'll be a wrap for this week.
Yep, I think that's it for me. Don't forget to keep me eye out. I may or may not have a wild cleric appear on your merking stations for your points.
We talking with Jay.
We'll have more announced on that later. We're going to talk about
guy.
that, obviously. But you know what? I think I like the idea of this of being basically the sought after bonus point guy. I think I can handle that for a couple days. For those who may or may not know, I have not been on a hiatus. I did not walk away or anything like that. Work has just extremely picked up. I've been working like 60-hour work weeks for about 2 months straight now. I am exhausted at most days. Anytime free time I have, I've been spending with my wife and daughter. So that's kind of why I haven't been around hardly at all. I've been more of a ghost, more or less lurking in the shadows, just making sure things don't blow up. So that's more or less what but no, I am around. I am not away. I am alive. I am not going away or disappearing anywhere. I am still very much part of the AC community. Maybe not as vocal, maybe not as apparent as I have been over the last year, but I am not going anywhere anytime soon.
And there you go.
All right.
We're out of here for this week. So thanks for tuning in. We will be back again next week, same time, same place, and we will catch you then. Till then, have fun with AC, and as long as you're playing it, enjoy Verdict Day, enjoy War for November. We'll see you out there. Take care.
See ya.